where we think e-learning is going to be heading in the 5-year horizon. Learning experience architect, Robert Todd.
Woohoo! Very exciting, very exciting. Before I actually start in sort of framing remarks, around technology we talk a lot about the future. Around the internet, people are focused a lot on the future. Sometimes it seems like, why don't we focus more on the now and, and less on what we're going to have, what's going to be happening. But I think in an information society, in a digital society, in a world that changes as fast as our world changes, the future is actually not something to ponder on for fictional purposes. The future is something that happens very fast. And we need to focus on the future because the future is coming at us so fast that we have to kind of focus our ability to, look out in the future, look at current trends, look at current data, look at current needs, and say, where is that going to take us so that we can be prepared to meet the future? And that's just kind of I think a byproduct of living in an age of really rapid change. So that's why, future is actually, I think, something worth paying attention to. Okay. So just as another piece of introduction, just so you know what I was doing before the 6 months of feet up at the desk. For 18 months, I ran our catalog course development group, and so produced over 100 e-learning courses that you'll now see in our IT catalog. So I have some experience with the practical as well as some experience with the impractical. So why is e-learning an important part of the future? The need for really continuous learning and for modes of delivering continuous learning is driven by an environment of change. Claude Shannon, the father of information theory, defined information by saying information causes change. No change, no information. A borrowed thought experiment. If I tell you there's a person sitting in the seat next to you, no change, there's no information, content in what I said. If I say the person sitting next to you in that seat is infected with the Ebola virus, there's now a change that I've elicited in you. That statement carried information value. Okay, information causes change. We live in don't worry, that was an experiment. That person's really not infected. We live in an information society. The rates of information production today are extraordinary, and all of that information causes change, or at least causes us to reassess our environment and so to try to change our position in relation to the environment. So we live in an environment where learning is necessary on a continuous basis to adapt to the environment we're in and to be successful there. So learning, change, they go together. Information causes change. We need learning. We need e-learning. Okay. So in the next 5 years, information society, big red statements. I have these several big red statements, right? In the next 5 years, the information society will become a global reality. What do I mean by that? What is that saying? Really, the web, the introduction of the web, the occurrence or the appearance of the web 5 years ago was a turning point in the development of the information society. We'd already, had a long 20th century of, increased production of information, sharing of information, the creation of universities. Back to you can say the information society started with the creation of the printing press. But the web was a real turning point in the information society because it provided a ubiquitous, easy to use, access at a distance to a wealth of information. We've had 5 years, essentially, of the World Wide Web. And what I want to talk about is sort of the next 5 years. It's been said that people constantly overestimate the change technology will bring in 2 years and constantly underestimate, by an order of magnitude, the change that technology will drive in a 10-year period. So I think that the 5 years that we've been through and the 5 years we're going to see is sort of the first 10 years of the web. And I think if we take those at whole, most of us underestimate the impact, and with all the hype you wouldn't believe that, but most of us underestimate the impact that the web's going to have on our world as a whole. Okay, please. So I want to take a look at some of the changes over the next 5 years in terms of the infrastructure for the information society. This is really the technological foundations for the information society, and I'm going to try to describe a scenario in 2005 that we can't really see, so we're going to kind of touch it from a number of different points and see if we can describe a little bit of the infrastructure. So currently, internet backbone capacity doubles every 100 days. So we're adding capacity to support the information infrastructure at an incredible rate. By 2005, broadband services will be available to over 80% of U.S. homes. If you look at satellite options, that may go right up to 100. Wireless internet access will blanket every major metropolitan area. So that means anywhere you're walking around in a major metropolitan area, there will be internet access bouncing off your body. Whether you choose to connect to it is another matter altogether. By 2005, the projected completion of Bill Gates' Craig McCaw's teledesic network, 286 low Earth orbiting satellites blanketing the globe with internet access. 95% of the Earth's landmass, 100% of the Earth's population will have access to high-speed uplink and downlink internet access. The whole planet. So you think about Africa, you think about places where infrastructure is so unable to support this kind of technology, and look at some of the developments happening in that time frame. It's pretty remarkable. Approximately, now try to get a real number here. You have to extrapolate a lot. But I mean, we're looking at around, by 2005, 1 billion people connected to the internet worldwide. I would say that's a significant body of folks. That has ubiquity, the availability of the internet, the number of people participating in this global infrastructure has a big impact on the value that's generated there. In devices, right, so if you're going to be participating in this information society, you need access to the network, and you need some device, some kind of device to connect you. You have to have a terminal through which you receive information and communicate information. So far, right, we don't have this thing yet set up. By 2005, U.S. PC penetration will be probably be above 70%. Right now we're at about 52, 53%. We're looks like we're reaching a plateau. It doesn't look like we'll increase at the same rate that we're currently increasing, so we can look for about 70% penetration. You can see the gaps here in the projections, but still 100 to 425 million net appliances, so that's a low-cost $100, $150 device that allows people in their homes to connect to the internet and access information and communication services on the net. 125 to 350 million PDAs worldwide. So a proliferation of handheld devices. This, I don't think, really takes into account the transformation of a PDA. I think you're going to see PDA prices driven down over the next several years, so that and embedded. So digital clothing. I don't think it's available. Today. I don't think that's too far-fetched. Really integrating access into very, very small devices. 200 to 800 million smartphones available worldwide. So that's the ability to, right now, send and receive small textual messages on a phone. Next generation technology coming soon that will allow small graphics. Limited by the form factor, right? Limited by this tiny little keyboard and the tiny display, but still able to connect millions of people to the information network. And then just in terms of platform growth, a 700 megahertz Pentium computer in 2005 for really under $150. And if you just talk about the processor, the main processing power, for tens of dollars, that kind of processing power available, which gives us the capability to have multiple processors per human being, networks of computers in your, the proliferation of processors means a lot more terminal access to the internet. Okay. Barraging you with statistics about the future. Growth of information production. It's really hard to get a handle on this, to get a grasp for how much information we're producing. Right now, information doubling is often talked about as at a 100-day rate on the internet, meaning we're doubling the quantity of information available on the internet every 100 days. You can see how quickly the progression goes at that kind of doubling rate. I don't expect it'll continue at that rate for many more years. In 1999, between 2 and 4 trillion email messages were sent and received in the United States. For comparison, the United States Mail Service processed 100 million pieces of mail. So in that same time, 2 to 4 trillion email messages. So an enormous quantity of information being generated there. I know most of us feel the weight of that information on a daily basis. And we're hoping that trend doesn't continue. And by 2005, over 10 billion pages on the internet. You're lucky you're not a digital librarian. You know, imagine what people are dealing with trying to catalog this enormous amount of information. So we're just generating so much information. We live in an environment saturated. Interestingly, while we're all pretty comfortable with that, with the fact that that is the case, that we live with an environment that has that much information, this is the first time in the history of human beings, when that's been the case. It's been a very recent time that information has been plentiful. All of our social institutions, our political institutions, all of our systems of higher education, all of our work structures have their foundations in a history of information scarcity. The way we interact with information still is get it, hoard it, keep it, it's mine, protect it. That is silly in an information environment that we live in. So we need to evolve. There's a lot of evolving that's necessary in terms of how we relate to information. When we live in an environment when information is accessible everywhere, what do you do with it? What's your relationship to that information? Hoarding is probably not the thing to do. Unless you want to be like a cat lady. There's going to have like information cat ladies. We're going to open the door and people are going to be in their house for 10 years with information everywhere. And we're not, okay, that was a bad analogy. But e-business growth by 2005. I guess these two numbers, B2C market, 400 million, 3 trillion. I think 400 million was after April and 3 trillion was before April. I don't know how those projections sort of vary with that drop that we saw. Global B2B market of 2 to 8 trillion. I mean, a trillion here, a trillion here, there. You've heard that adds up to some significant money. So e-business is growing. I mean, when people talk about the stability of the tech market, and will tech continue to grow, I always ask them this question: do you think that computers and networking will be a major part of how we conduct business in the next 20 years? Nobody says anything but, well, of course. So sort of interesting. Today, high-tech workers, why is that growing? A couple of points. High-tech workers earn 56% more than the national average, on average. 52% of U.S. companies are selling online. Actually, that's the statistic. That's an updated statistic. Is 38% of large and medium companies are connected. Was, I think, a better statistic than the 52%. What's really interesting too is in small business growth. If you look at the small business numbers, it's something like 85% of small businesses have internet connections, have plans to migrate their business plan to the internet. It's a big enabling factor for entrepreneurial activity in small business. And high tech in the past, since 1995, actually, yeah, so that's the more recent. Since 1995 has driven more than 35% of all U.S. economic growth. And that actually, if you take a shorter time frame and look at the past 3 or 4 years, that number just continues to go up. All right. I had to change this from I generation because I didn't want to be, proprietary here. Generation I, the internet generation, by 2005, okay, so by this date, 22% of the U.S. workforce will be people 16 to 24. All of those people will have grown up, 22% of our workforce will have grown up with the internet as a given, the web as a given. That is as a part of their life, as not a new occurrence, as something that they expect to be there. All of the things, there's a great book by Donald Tapscott called Growing Up Digital that really talks about the trends in this group and the paradigms that they're going to change given their expectations of technology. So, when we talk about how the internet functions in our society and our business, we often focus on ourselves, and our own adoption of it. I mean, ourselves, the age of the people in this room, which is not probably 16 to 24 for the most part. When that group of people starts entering the information society, they have a much higher expectation of what the network is there for and what it can do. So, and this is sort of, I questioned whether to stick this in here or not, but you could disagree. My experience in higher education doing this kind of work, e-learning stuff, tells me that higher education, our institutions of higher education, will not, over the next 5 years, I think the longer term outlook may be better, but in the next 5 years, be able to meet the challenge of preparing people for working in the new economy.